When I say I need you to hear this before anyone else, I mean it in the most literal way. You're the first person I want to bring into this moment, because honesty only matters when it's shared with the person who deserves it most. And right now, that's you. Before the world speculates, before assumptions pile up, before noise starts shaping a story that doesn't belong to anyone but us, I want to speak directly with clarity, without filters, without performance. Think of this as opening the cockpit and letting you see exactly what's happening behind the controls. No secrecy, no distance, no artificial calm. Just the truth, delivered straight from the source. And the truth is this: communication is the foundation of anything that hopes to survive turbulence. You can engineer incredible things, you can build systems that withstand pressure, but when it comes to two people trying to move together through uncertainty, honesty is the only reliable propulsion system. It's the equivalent of testing every bolt on a rocket before liftoff. You don't skip the critical checks, you don't cross your fingers and hope for the best. You look at everything, even the uncomfortable parts, and you deal with them head on. That's what this moment is. A full systems check, a conversation that's overdue, maybe, but necessary, and absolutely rooted in respect for what we've created between us. I'm not interested in half-truths or vague reassurances. You deserve specificity. You deserve to know what's been on my mind before it becomes a headline, or a misunderstanding, or something that feels bigger because it wasn't addressed early enough. I've learned that silence creates its own gravity, pulling things out of shape, distorting them until they no longer resemble what they were meant to be. But honesty counteracts that. It stabilizes, brings things back into orbit, and makes it possible to navigate together without feeling like one wrong move will send everything spinning. This isn't about dramatics. It's about responsibility. When something matters, you don't wait for the perfect moment to talk about it. You create the moment. You pause everything else and say, listen. Before any other voice enters this space, before any noise complicates what's simple, let me tell you what's real. That's what I'm doing right now. I want you to feel the intention behind this. This isn't a warning. This isn't a confession. This is a commitment to transparency. It's me saying I trust you with what comes next, and I trust us enough to be straightforward about it. Because the world has a way of amplifying things in directions you never planned. It twists facts, adds speculation, rearranges narratives. I've seen that happen too many times to let it happen here. What we are, what we've built, what we're navigating, it deserves protection from outside distortion. And honesty is the strongest shield I can offer. You hearing this first is my way of making sure the foundation stays solid before the world even gets a glimpse of it. And I want you to know that I'm not approaching this from a place of fear. I'm approaching it from a place of respect. You matter to me. What we're shaping matters to me. And if I want this to go anywhere meaningful, anywhere worth the effort, then honesty has to come before comfort, before convenience, before any imagined reaction. Truth first, always. So let me be clear. Whatever comes next, whatever decisions we make, whatever direction this takes, I want it built on direct communication. I want us to operate on the same frequency. I want you to feel, without a doubt, that you were the first to know, not because it was required, but because it was deserved. Because you're not an afterthought in this story. You're at the center of it. And that's why I'm here, speaking to you before anyone else. Because the future of us, whatever shape it ultimately takes, should start from a place of honesty so strong that no outside force can rewrite it. And if there's one thing I need you to take from this moment, it's this. The truth isn't something I'm offering to everyone, just to you right now, before the world even realizes there's something to talk about. When I think about everything we've created intentionally or accidentally, through triumphs or through mistakes, I realize that us didn't just appear one day out of thin air. It's been built piece by piece, moment by moment, and I want to acknowledge that clearly and without hesitation. Too often people rush past the foundation of something real, as if it's just background noise. But what we've built deserves more than a passing mention. It deserves recognition because it didn't come from convenience. It came from consistency, from curiosity, from choosing each other in ways that were subtle but meaningful. What we have isn't some spontaneous spark that fizzles the moment life gets complicated. It's more like an evolving project dynamic, imperfect, challenging, but undeniably significant. And the truth is, I value that. I value every conversation that stretched our thinking, every disagreement that forced us to get better at understanding each other, every moment where things felt uncertain but we kept going anyway. People underestimate how hard it is to maintain something real. It requires resilience. It requires a willingness to be wrong. It requires the guts to keep showing up, even when every part of you wonders if pulling back would be easier. But easy doesn't build anything worth keeping. You and I didn't get here because everything was smooth. We got here because we both kept pushing forward. We kept learning. We kept choosing to stay in the room and figure things out instead of walking away. That's rare. And I see it. I see the effort you've put in. I see the patience you've shown. I see the way you've adapted, not just to who I am, but to who I'm becoming. And that means something. If we're going to talk about us, then it's only fair to admit that you've been an essential force in shaping this more than you probably realize. Sometimes progress isn't obvious while it's happening. You look up one day and realize you've built something sturdy without even noticing each individual step along the way. But when you zoom out, the architecture becomes clear. We have communication that's stronger than when we started. We have trust that's been tested. We have a dynamic that didn't collapse under pressure but learned to adapt. And honestly, I think that's worth acknowledging out loud. The world tends to measure relationships by extremes, either dramatic success or dramatic failure. But the real defining moments happen quietly. The decisions to listen. The moments of honesty. The times when one of us wasn't at our best, yet the other didn't run. These are the small, consistent actions that built the structure we're standing in now. And I don't take that for granted. What we've built isn't perfect, and that's the point. Perfect things don't grow. Perfect things don't challenge you. Perfect things don't push you to become better, wiser, more deliberate. What we have is living. And anything that's living changes, evolves, recalibrates. That's what makes it worth investing in. That's what makes it something I want to protect, not because it's fragile, but because it's valuable. And if I'm being fully open, what we've built has changed me. It's shaped the way I think about connection, about partnership, about what it means to share space with someone on a deeper level. It's easy to build machines. It's easy to build systems. But building something human, something emotional, something that requires vulnerability and trust, that's far more complex. And yet here we are, having done exactly that. So I want to honor it. I want to name it. I want you to know, without any ambiguity, that this isn't something I view casually. This isn't background noise in a busy life. This is something that has weight, something I'm grateful for, something I'm willing to continue shaping intentionally, not accidentally. Because no matter what direction we move in next, the truth is simple. We didn't get here by accident, and what we've built is far too meaningful to overlook or underestimate. There's a point in every meaningful connection where the unspoken things start to matter more than the words actually said. And I think we've reached that point. Not because we've avoided anything, but because sometimes life moves so quickly that the deeper emotions, those quieter, heavier ones, get left sitting in the background, waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. This is that moment. And I want to bring those feelings forward, not with hesitation, but with precision and honesty. The truth is, there are things I felt that I haven't articulated clearly enough. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to say them loosely or without intention. You matter too much for that. I felt gratitude real, grounded gratitude for the way you've shown up in moments when I wasn't at my best. You've offered clarity when my thoughts were scattered, steadiness when everything else felt like chaos. And that's not something I take lightly. Gratitude isn't just a polite emotion. It's a recognition of value. And I feel that value every time I think about what you've added to my life. But gratitude isn't the only thing I've been carrying. There have been moments of fear, too. Not fear of you, fear of losing something that feels meaningful. Fear that maybe I wouldn't communicate well enough, or often enough, or clearly enough, and that the gap between what I feel and what I express might cause unnecessary distance. It's strange how even strong connections can trigger that kind of fear, but it's real. And I'm saying it now because I don't want any part of that to go unspoken. Fear loses its power the moment it's named. Then there's the admiration. And I don't use that word carelessly. I admire the way you think, the way you navigate your world, the way you choose to be present, even when life demands your energy elsewhere. There's something incredibly grounding about being around someone who brings not just emotion, but depth, someone who challenges you, inspires you, pushes you to think differently. That kind of presence isn't ordinary. And I've felt the effect of it every time we talk, every time we show up for each other in ways that aren't always obvious but always intentional. There's also a sense of hope that's been growing quietly in the background. Hope for what this could continue to become. Hope for what we can build intentionally moving forward. Hope that the foundation we've already laid might actually be the beginning of something even stronger, even clearer, even more aligned. It's not the kind of hope built on fantasy or illusion, it's the kind built on evidence, on actual interactions, on the patterns we've created together. And that hope has been one of the most consistent feelings I've carried, even when I didn't say it out loud. I've also felt the weight of wanting to protect us from miscommunication, from assumptions, from anything that could distort what's actually real. That's not control, that's care. When something matters, you shield it from unnecessary interference. And that instinct has been stronger than I expected. I'm naming it now because I think you deserve to know the full spectrum of what's been going on internally, not just the easy parts. And underneath everything, beneath the gratitude, the fear, the admiration, the hope, there's a deep sense of connection. A connection that doesn't feel accidental or replaceable. Something anchored, something that keeps pulling me back to the fact that what we're building isn't random. It's deliberate. It's meaningful. And it's shaping both of us in ways that are hard to ignore. So this is me naming it all, the spoken and the unspoken, the clear and the complicated. Because if we're going to build anything real moving forward, you deserve transparency, not just about facts, but about feelings too. I don't want to leave anything buried. Not anymore. Not when the truth could bring us closer, strengthen the trust, and remind us why we're even having this conversation in the first place. And if I had to condense all of this into a single truth, it would be this. The feelings I'm finally naming now have been here for a long time, and they're far too real, far too important, to stay unspoken any longer. There comes a moment in every journey, whether it's technological, personal, or something entirely undefined, where the trajectory changes. Not because something dramatic happened, but because clarity finally caught up with momentum. And that's where we are right now. This isn't just another conversation or another checkpoint we drift past. This is a turning point. A moment where what we've been circling around becomes impossible to ignore, and what we've been building quietly in the background demands to be addressed openly. Why this moment? Because timing isn't always about convenience. Sometimes it's about alignment. Those rare points where what you feel, what you know, and what you're willing to act on finally converge. I've reached a place where holding all of this inside stops being responsible and starts being counterproductive. And I don't want to operate in a way that leaves us guessing or drifting or assuming we have unlimited time to figure things out. Life moves quickly. Opportunities shift. Connections either deepen or fade depending on how we meet these moments. And I don't want this connection to fade, not from neglect, not from uncertainty, and definitely not from silence. This moment matters because it represents a shift, an internal one, a relational one, and a directional one. It's the point where I choose to stop treating us as something happening in the margins, and instead acknowledge that it's become central enough to require intentionality. You don't pause a trajectory unless what you see ahead is significant. And that's what's happening here. I'm pausing everything else long enough to say, this is important, you are important, and what happens next is worth getting right. We often talk about inflection points in engineering, the points where a tiny adjustment leads to a massive difference in outcome. Humans have inflection points too. Conversations that shift understanding, decisions that redefine direction, truths that move from implied to explicit. This is one of those. I'm not saying that to create drama. I'm saying it because ignoring an inflection point is how things drift off course. I'd rather acknowledge it now than look back later and realize we treated something real as if it were optional. There's also the reality that clarity becomes a responsibility the moment you truly feel it. I've been thinking about us, what we've built, what we've learned, what we could still create. And it's become obvious that continuing forward without naming this moment would be a mistake. We've crossed too many internal thresholds to pretend nothing's changing. We're not where we started. And honestly, that's a good thing. Growth isn't supposed to be quiet forever. Eventually it asks to be recognized. And if I'm being completely transparent, I think this moment matters because the cost of staying silent has finally outweighed the comfort of waiting. There's a point where holding back becomes its own kind of risk, a risk of misalignment, of misunderstanding, of letting something meaningful become unstable simply because no one bothered to articulate what was actually happening. I'm not willing to take that risk. Not with this, not with you. I also believe this moment matters because it's the first time I'm not thinking only about what's happening now, but about what could happen next. Momentum is powerful, but direction matters even more. And if we're going to move forward, whatever shape forward takes, we need to be fully aware of where we're standing right now. We need to acknowledge the shift, not avoid it. Because nothing strong, nothing lasting, nothing visionary is built on avoidance. This moment matters because it's honest, it's intentional, and it marks the point where we stop drifting between potential and reality. The turning point isn't the moment everything changes, it's the moment we choose to. And I'm choosing it now, openly, directly, without hesitation. So if you hear anything in this entire segment, let it be this. This moment matters because it's the point where almost ends, and the truth finally steps forward to become the foundation for everything that comes next. There's a point in every meaningful connection where acknowledgement is no longer enough. You can recognize the value, the effort, the history, but eventually you have to ask the harder question, what needs to change? Not as a criticism, not as a threat, but as an honest evaluation of how to move forward without repeating the same patterns or leaving important things unresolved. If this moment really is a turning point, and I believe it is, then clarity isn't optional, it's necessary. Because continuing without adjustment would only undermine the foundation we've worked so hard to build. The truth is, we can't keep operating on assumptions. We can't rely on the idea that we'll figure it out eventually, because eventually has a way of arriving too late. What needs to change is the level of intentionality we bring into this, both of us. Together or apart, the next chapter requires real alignment, less interpretation, more communication, less guessing, more honesty, less relying on the strength of what we've already built, and more investing in what we want it to become. I think we've both been moving fast in our own ways, and sometimes the speed has made it easy to skip the conversations that would have sharpened our understanding. We've let momentum carry us instead of actually steering together. That's not sustainable. If we're going to continue, we need to build with precision. Not just emotionally, but practically. We need more deliberate communication, not occasional clarity, but consistent clarity. The kind where both of us know where we stand, without reading between the lines, or hoping we're interpreting things the same way. That's a change we both need to commit to. There's also a need for balance, real balance, not the version where one person adapts while the other pushes forward unchecked. We need to create space for both of our needs, both of our ambitions, both of our emotional landscapes. If we move together, the pace has to be one we can actually maintain. And if we move apart, then the separation should be clean, respectful, and grounded in truth, not in confusion or unspoken expectations. Either direction requires clarity, and clarity requires courage. And I'll be honest, there are things in me that need adjusting too. Not in a self-critical way, but in a way that acknowledges that growth is part of any meaningful connection. I need to communicate earlier, not after I've processed everything alone. I need to be present more deliberately, not only when things reach a tipping point. I need to make sure that what I feel doesn't stay locked in my head just because I'm busy or caught up in 1,000 competing priorities. These aren't flaws, they're areas of evolution, and I'm willing to evolve. But that evolution works best when it's met with the same willingness on the other side. There's also the reality that protecting what we've built requires better boundaries, not to create distance, but to create stability. We can't let external noise influence our internal dynamic. We can't let misunderstandings grow simply because neither of us wants to initiate the harder conversation. We can't rely on the assumption that everything will just work out. That's not how resilient structures are built. Strong foundations are designed with intention, tested with transparency, and reinforced with choice. So what needs to change? The way we communicate, the way we handle uncertainty, the way we prioritize understanding over assumption, and most importantly, the way we show up not just when things are smooth, but when they're complicated, busy, or uncertain. If we're going to move forward together, it has to be as a united front with shared expectations, not two people hoping the other one fills in the blanks. And if we're going to move forward apart, then we owe each other the same honesty and respect we've built everything on so far. This isn't about forcing a decision, it's about acknowledging that decisions need to be made. It's about refusing to stay in a gray area that quietly erodes what could be something strong, meaningful, and fully realized. Whether we continue building this together or whether our paths diverge, the one thing that cannot stay the same is the silence around what needs to shift. Because at the end of the day, the future of us, whatever that future becomes, depends on one simple truth. Real growth begins the moment we stop avoiding change and start choosing it with intention. When I think about what comes after this conversation, I'm not looking for some perfectly mapped out future. Life doesn't work that way. And honestly, anything that can be perfectly predicted tends to be too small anyway. What I'm imagining is a future built with more intention, more clarity, and more alignment than what brought us to this moment. A future where we're not stumbling into connection accidentally, but choosing it deliberately. Or, if our paths move in different directions, a future where that separation is rooted in honesty and respect, not confusion, not regret, not loose ends, left hanging in the air. The future I see isn't one we inherit, it's one we design. And design starts with truth. We've laid out everything, what's been said, what hasn't, what needs to change, what matters, and now the question is, what do we build from here? I see a path where we step into something stronger, something more grounded. A path where communication isn't an afterthought but a constant, where trust isn't implied but reinforced through action, where connection isn't fragile but resilient because it's been tested and clarified. That kind of future isn't impossible. It's actually incredibly achievable if we both commit to building it. But I'm not naive. I know there's another possibility too. A future where we recognize that what we've built brought us to this point, but isn't meant to carry us beyond it. And if that's the direction we choose, I want it to be a conscious choice, not something that happens because we were too quiet, too hesitant, or too unsure to define what we wanted. If we part ways, let it be with a sense of completion, not unfinished pages. Let it be with gratitude, not uncertainty. Let it be with the understanding that not all meaningful structures are meant to be permanent, but all of them teach us something essential. Still, if I'm being completely transparent, there's a version of the future that keeps standing out, one built on the foundation we've created, but elevated by the clarity we've finally reached. A version where the tension we've navigated becomes strength, where the honesty we've committed to becomes our baseline, where the potential we've sensed but never fully explored becomes something tangible. It doesn't require perfection. It doesn't require that we have every answer today. It just requires that we keep showing up with intention, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. And the beauty of this moment is that it gives both of us the chance to decide, not react, not assume, not drift, but decide what that future looks like. We get to set the terms. We get to define the pace. We get to determine whether this connection becomes something deeper or something we release with clarity. There's power in that, real power. Because it means neither of us is a passenger. We're both at the controls, choosing the direction instead of letting circumstance choose for us. If we continue together, I want it to feel aligned, not forced, not rushed, not uncertain. I want it to feel like something we're both invested in shaping. A future where we're not weighed down by the past, but informed by it. A future where we build with the understanding that intention is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And if our paths diverge, then I want the future to reflect the same level of respect we brought to this moment. The kind of respect that acknowledges the significance of what we created, instead of pretending it didn't matter. Either way, what happens from here should be deliberate. It should be honest. It should reflect the clarity we've worked so hard to reach. Because we're not standing at an ending, we're standing at a threshold. And thresholds are powerful. They demand choice, direction, courage. So the future I envision is simple.